Hey, folks, this clip is brought to you by Farm Bureau Health Plans. For better coverage, better rates, and better service, go to fbhp.com/ATOZ. That is Farm Bureau Health Plans. So now let's get to the couple of things that you wrote on A to Z today, Zach. I sent it to you. Do you have it open in front of you? There was a couple of things that came up where basically, obviously, all offseason, everybody's a blowhard. We're just kind of talking to talk because this is what we do. This is what we get paid to do. And so you just have to talk about things. And there were some folks from national media outlets just speaking out into the ether about what they think about Tennessee. This was Zach's headline, here's where Tennessee falls in post-spring power rankings from prominent national media outlet. This was from On3, I think. What'd they have to say, Zach?
Yeah, I thought it was a pretty fair post-spring power rankings. I mean, obviously it doesn't mean a whole lot. It's basically just getting the temperature of how the national media views Tennessee going into, 2023. And you look back at last season, I think some folks were optimistic that Tennessee would take a step forward, but they didn't think they were going to win 11 games, right? I mean, most people, even us, we thought 9 wins, probably the ceiling coming off the impressive 6-win, first season for Heupel, or 7-win regular season for Heupel. Going into this season, it doesn't, it feels like Tennessee's getting a little more respect than they did last year, which again, fair considering where the program's been, but they're not assuming that Tennessee's going to be that top 5, that the teams that win 11-ish games a season, essentially. They have them at number 12 in their post-spring power rankings, which that's probably about where they should be. You lost a lot of NFL talent: Hendon Hooker, Jalen Hyatt, Cedric Tillman, Darnell Wright, Byron Young. We all know, those guys are gone, and you have to replace those guys. You have to prove that you have people to step up and replace those guys. And we think they do with Square White, Dante Thornton, John Campbell, the offensive tackle transfer from Miami, obviously Joe Milton stepping in. But those guys have to prove that they can play to the same level that last year's Vols did. So until they do that and do it consistently every single year, and Josh Heupel's running a 10, 11 game winning, team out there every single season, they're just not going to get that type of respect. And it's something that Alabama gets that same season as Tennessee last year, arguably a bigger question at quarterback, but they kind of get that benefit of the doubt because of what they've done. And I'm sure some Tennessee fans probably don't love that, but you got to win more than 11 games. You can't just do it one season. You got to do it back-to-back seasons. You got to do it, 3 out of 5 years, those types of seasons before you really start to get that respect. I think the one question I had with some of their rankings is they had LSU pretty high, at number 4, also coming off the same record as Tennessee last season. Actually, I think they lost the extra game because of the SEC championship game, but lost to Tennessee in the regular season. They're kind of getting the benefit of the doubt. I don't know if it's the Brian Kelly effect, where he had the success at Notre Dame and kind of had a little rocky start at LSU and had a pretty good finish to the season. I think you have to respect what he did down there in Baton Rouge, but it does feel like they're kind of getting propped up a little bit coming off the same type of season Tennessee had, whereas the Vols, it's like, hey, you got to show us before we believe it.
I'm still trying to keep this perspective. And this will probably change after this season. But if you told me in between year 2 and year 3 for Josh Heupel that you'd be coming off of 11 wins and that, a large national media outlet would be saying in the offseason that Tennessee is number 12 for the coming season, I would have gone, oh, you're crazy. Shut up. What are you talking about? There's no way that Josh Heupel is going to build this thing that quickly. Take a chill pill. We'll get there 4 or 5 years, maybe. That would have been my thought. And so I'm still trying to keep that perspective. While at the same time, I want to go, give me 11 wins again. That's what we all want. Beat Bama, beat Florida. This season, obviously the huge ones, beat Georgia. We all want that, but those expectations are something that I think it would be almost cruel to saddle Tennessee with, to go like just 12 wins is the expectation this season. Like, I mean, that's like really, it's a lot. And so I don't want to be defeatist and just talk Tennessee into only a 9-win season or something like that. Can they beat every team on their schedule? Yes. I think that's unequivocally true. They will be favored in probably every game. I would guess. Obviously, we'll see after the season starts, but I would bet that they're favored in every game except Bama and Georgia. Maybe Texas A&M, depending on how exactly that looks. But I believe that game's in
That's in
Neyland.
Knoxville. Yeah, it's in
Yeah.
Knoxville.
So, I mean
But
that.
that is almost like a trap game. I've seen it described that way. It's wedged in there between South Carolina and Alabama. And I know Texas A&M had kind of had a down year last year, but that's only Jimbo Fisher's second losing season ever, I think, which includes that last year at Florida State when he was pretty much checked out. And I'm not going to say that Jimbo's going to come back and go, 10-2 this season, or 11-1, or 9-3, or whatever. Who knows what happens? Maybe he turns it around, maybe he doesn't. But that's not a team you can sleep on just because they went 5-7 last season.
I completely agree. It really is going to be a crapshoot as far as they could, because the guy can't coach offense. And it used to be his thing. I mean,
Well, he always had these great Jameis Winston. He
yeah,
had this transcendent quarterback that kind of carried that team. So was it Winston? Was it Fisher? I mean, it's kind of like Joe Burrow and Ed Ogeron, maybe, in a way.
maybe. But I mean, on the whole, I'm fine with this assessment. It may be, even for my comfortability, it may be even a little too high. I kind of go like, maybe put us a little more under the radar. I'm okay with that. I loved the element of last season of just total surprise, where Tennessee kind of came out of the weeds and just was, we're here. What's up, everybody? Like, you're not hiding.
Well, it's certainly fun when you're not expecting it and you go on this roll and you beat Florida, you beat LSU, you beat Alabama, and you set up that big showdown with Georgia, which didn't go Tennessee's way. But to even be in that type of matchup, that magnitude in November, those are the games Tennessee wants to be in, and they were in that game. It didn't go their way. Georgia outplayed them. They straight up beat them. And I think we all know that. But still, just getting to play in those games, that's the goal when you come to Tennessee.
Farm Bureau Health Plans has been serving Tennesseans for over 75 years, and much has changed in Tennessee over the years, but some has stayed the same. Farm Bureau Health Plans has always valued personal relationships, especially when it comes to good health and good service. Plan on Farm Bureau Health Plans for health, dental, and vision. For better coverage, better rates, and better service, go to fbhp.com/ATOZ or walk into one of their 200 plus locations across the state of Tennessee. That is fbhp.com/ATOZ. Farm Bureau Health Plans.
Clearly, they want to win those games moving forward, but you got to at least put yourself in position to be in those games to start with.
Billy Jones in the comments says we should be top 10. You wouldn't hear a peep out of me if Tennessee ends up being top 10 preseason.
I mean, it really doesn't matter. You got to go out there and prove it starting week 1 against Virginia.
Exactly.
I mean, you go out there and you lay an edge against Virginia and win by 7 or lose. I mean, any of those things are possible. It's another Power 5 team. Suddenly, it doesn't really matter where you were ranked preseason.
Definitely not. And then Skylar Hyde on Twitter, actually, he says 10-2. 10-2, Charlie. 10-2 is what he says.
Which on paper, that's pretty fair. I mean, if you think the Georgia game is going to be a loss, which it's probably going to be more winnable than last year for sure, because it's in Knoxville. You don't have, they're breaking in a new quarterback, though by that late in the season, Georgia should have found their groove, and hopefully Tennessee as well. But you would say that game and the Alabama game in Tuscaloosa, even with their quarterback situation, you haven't won there since 2003. So same thing with the Swamp in Florida. Though I do think you win that game against Florida. I think you're just the better team. I'm not sold on Billy Napier, and it hasn't went great down there yet. But the Georgia and Alabama game for sure, though, are the two losses that I think most people would probably pencil in.
It's pretty much this simple for me. If you get through Florida undefeated, 10-2 is my prediction for Tennessee. The one that I flip flop on is maybe Texas A&M, but the rest of
those, see what they do those first few weeks of the season.
Yeah, it would depend. I would say this: if you demolish Virginia and then you go to the Swamp and win by 17,
like the Baton Rouge game last year.
Exactly. If you get to that point, I might be predicting 11-1, and take your pick between Georgia and Alabama, which one that might be. But that might be my prediction at that point. If it looks like Tennessee is a little bit of a steamroller, like they were last season,
if Georgia was in September, like late September,
I agree
better about that. But being the next to last game of the season for Tennessee, that's tough. That's when Georgia's really at their best usually.
But it's again, to kind of put things in perspective, it's honestly pretty crazy. Like I feel like obviously I've done radio or podcasts for years and years and years now. And I've always said stuff like, well, if Tennessee comes out and they look like if they look amazing. And in all of these years leading up to Josh Heupel, that never came true. You know, Butch Jones, you go out there and you got a freaking stacked team, a bunch of dudes ended up playing in the NFL, you know, a team that should have won not just the SEC East, but probably should have won the SEC and played in the playoff in 2015, 2016, take your pick there. You know, there was always that. And then Josh Heupel.
Yeah, and Butch would go, you know, to overtime against Appalachian State.
Yes. I mean, that was what we always got. And then last season, I mean, we probably said the same sort of stuff. Well, you know, if you got Florida at home, you make it through Florida undefeated, and then you're looking at LSU. I mean, hey, this could happen. And then it actually did. It actually came to fruition that stuff actually happened. Finally, it really did get here. And you know, obviously, none of us really knew what to do. We were all just sitting around going like, "How is this real? What's going on?" But you know, at now, since we've seen it happen, it's kind of like when basketball won the SEC championship or baseball, the way how good baseball has been. You go like, okay, this is reality now. This can really happen. You can have a baseball team that good. You can have a basketball team that wins an SEC championship. You can have a football team that wins 11 games. We're back with those kind of actual expectations. But you know, at first glance, and this will change after week 1 probably, but at first glance, this feels like 9 wins is most likely, 10 wins is good, 11 wins is gravy, 12 wins you're in the playoff. I mean, it's the best season in forever for Tennessee. And so any of those outcomes is realistic, but it's what is most likely. And so at 9 to 10 wins, somewhere right in there, I mean, that puts Tennessee at maybe top 10, probably top 15. And so that number 12 feels pretty right to me. But before we move on, Zach, anything else on expectations for next season? We can't exhaust it too much. It's a long off season.
Yeah, I mean, we'll make official predictions, I'm sure, later on this summer before the season starts and go through the schedule and see how everything's shaping up. But I think the main thing is you want to get around 10 wins. You want to do that back-to-back seasons, and you don't want to get blown out by Georgia and Alabama. And there are no moral victories. I mean, Josh Heupel's made it clear he wants to go to Atlanta, wants to win a championship. I mean, that's their goal, and it should be. It should be every team's goal. I don't care what team it is. If you're not setting out there to win every game, what's the point of even going out there? But you also you want to belong in these games. And I've said for years on the podcast and writing that when Tennessee's like officially back, it's when that game against Alabama is a toss-up. Well, you beat them in Knoxville. Alabama's probably going to be favored in Tuscaloosa, regardless of what happens the first few games of the season. You go play them close. It goes down to the wire. You beat them. You lose by a score. Suddenly, that is what that game's become. It could go either way. And that's the way Tennessee, Alabama should be. Some years, you know, Alabama's going to have a better team or Tennessee's going to have the better team. In other years, the way it kind of was back before Nick Saban was in town and before Tennessee's downfall. So as long as you're in those games, it's coming down to the last 5 minutes of the quarter. I mean, you can't go win every single game. It's just not feasible every single season. I mean, Georgia's eventually going to trend downward. They're not going to stay at this level forever. Same thing with Alabama, and which we've already started to see a little bit with Bama from the way they used to dominate. So I think that's the main thing is you don't want to give up on any games. You don't want to have a repeat of that South Carolina game from last season, even if that's against Alabama. You don't want to lose by 25 points to anybody. So I think that's the main takeaway for me this in 2023 is it's kind of a transition year, which, you know, 1998 was kind of supposed to be that too with T. Martin after Peyton. And I'm not going to come out here and, you know, call a national championship. I don't think anybody was then either. But that aside, it is kind of a transition year going into Nico in 2024, which is kind of 2024, 2025. That's when you're really expecting Tennessee to go compete for a national championship. And, you know, they need to do that because that's kind of what they're building towards.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. And you're building towards not just Nico, but potentially a pretty decently strong defense, depending on how the chips fall for you. And on that note, our next topic is going to be a little recruiting news about Tennessee's defense, but also Tennessee's offense. There was tidbits on both sides of the ball from their recruiting landscape.